Hello, I need your help with something real quickly. I did 2 drawings this morning. I need your help to tell me which one looks more realistic or more like it's in real life. The first drawing I did was of an apple right here. Now I took the exact same apple and I drew it a second time right here. Which one looks more realistic? If you said the second one, you're absolutely right. And the reason why the second one looks more realistic is because I was using something called value and contrast. Those are going to be our 2 art vocabulary words today. We're also going to be learning about an artist named Caravaggio who used value and contrast. And the last thing we're going to be doing today is learning 4 different techniques for shading and drawing some objects. Let's go ahead and let's get started. Our 2 art vocabulary words today are value and contrast. Now let's take a look at my 2 apple drawings again, first and second. If I tell you that value means using light and darkness inside of a drawing, which one has value? If you said the second one, you're absolutely right. So we know that if we use value, things might look more realistic. Now what about that word contrast? Let's move over to my computer to check it out. So what I did is I took my camera to take a picture of these tangerines inside of a bowl. Now I want to teach you this word contrast. So contrast means the different amount of light and dark there is inside this image. Another artist word that we might use is the word tone. So tone is kind of the shade that's already on that image. So this tone is gray, this tone is gray, and all my tones look kind of the same. That means there's not a lot of contrast. If I wanted to make more contrast, I would use more tones. So let's go ahead and see how that might look. Wow, do you see the amount of lights and dark there is now? Look how dark this area is and how light this area is. When we add contrast to an image, a lot of times we make it more interesting for someone to look at. Now let's look at an artist today that was using a lot of value and contrast. His name is Caravaggio. Let's take a look at his famous work of art. Let's look at this amazing artwork by a painter named Caravaggio. The name of this painting is called The Calling of St. Matthew. Caravaggio was an Italian artist that was born in Milan in 1571 and died in 1610. He did not have an easy life. When he was a little kid, his town got something called the plague, which is a disease, and they had to run away from that town. When he got older, he had a lot of problems with his anger. He carried a sword around with him and he used to fight people all the time. One time he got so angry, in fact, he killed another person. Then he had to go running away from the law for the rest of his career. So he did paintings here and there, but he was a very troubled artist. Now, this picture is a good example of value and contrast. Caravaggio is very famous for using really bright lights and really dark tones. Do you see how these faces are illuminated or have a lot of light on them? And down underneath this table, it is almost so dark that you can barely tell what's going on. This made his paintings interesting, and people from all over traveled to see them. Now, in today's lesson, we're going to start with first making a value scale. After we make our value scale, we're going to move into 4 different types of shading. Let's get started. In today's lesson, you're only going to need a couple things. The first thing you're going to need is a pencil. If you have an eraser, that'd be great as well. A ruler. If you don't have a ruler at home, you can use the side of a book or something that has a straight edge to it. And you need a sheet of paper. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to make is my value scale. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to place my ruler on my paper, and I'm going to make a long rectangle. Now you can make it almost the full length of the paper. Leave a little space at the edge. And remember to use your names of your lines. So I'm using verticals, vertical, and let's do horizontal. Now, what I want to do is I want to make 5 different boxes in here. So I need 4 different vertical lines. So let's go 1, 2, 3, 4. Now my last one is bigger than all my other ones. That's not really a big problem though. Okay, we're going to start making a value scale going from light to dark. So what I like to do is put a little sun on this side. Then in this one, I like to make the sun setting. In this one, I like to make the moon rising. This one, a full moon. And this one, you can just leave blank. That's gonna be our darkest one though. That could be like stars. Now we're gonna use hatching, but don't worry, after this particular lesson, we're gonna learn how to use 4 different kinds of shading. So to start off with, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna make some lines and color in my darkest square or rectangle. Now, to make things dark, I can push hard on my pencil, or I can keep going over it. That's pretty dark. Now I want to make this one a little bit lighter. So I'm going to go a little bit lighter, pushing on my pencil. And this one's going to be even a little bit lighter. So I'm going to push a little bit lighter on my pencil. Now these two look kind of the same. So I'm going to go over this one more time to make this one a little bit darker. This one, I'm going to push really light. And this last one, I'm barely going to touch my paper. I'm going to be kind of like a feather floating, just really soft. Okay, so now I can see that my value goes from light to dark. If you want to take your finger you can use to smear. So I'm going to use my finger to smear. I'm going to smear them together a little bit. It just blends it a little bit. You can see it makes your finger really messy though. And this is going to be called my value scale. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to write the word value and scale. And then I'm going to take a picture of this. And the reason why I'm going to take a picture of this, because then I can send it in on Google Classroom or email it to Mr. Wenzel or Mr. Mariani to show you that you completed your value scale. What I want you to do now is take your paper and fold it in half like a book. Then fold it one more time. So when I open it up, I have 4 different squares. 1, 2, 3, 4. What I want you to do is I want you to go ahead and make a circle in each square. So 1, 2, 3, and 4. So I have 4 squares and 4 circles. Now, we're going to start by shading in each one of these squares with 3 or 4 different types of shading. The first one is going to be called stippling. Stippling is dots. This is probably the hardest one. Now I want my shape to be darker at the bottom because I'm going to make my sunshine coming this way. So you can make a sun in each one if you want. And stippling just means dots. And if I want to make my darker areas, I put my dots closer to each other. I put less space between them. But as they go up towards the light, I start to let more space between them, and that makes it lighter. This one takes the longest, and maybe is the hardest to do. This is called hatching, and we just used hatching. Those are just lines that go across. And again, the space between the lines can tell how light it is. The closer the lines are together, the darker the area will be. So if this one's hatching, we know cross hatching is pretty simple. So we can start off by just hatching. But then for cross hatching, you can slide your paper over if you want and go across it, kind of making it look like a waffle. And it gets lighter. And remember, the more lines and the closer together, the darker it is. And my last one is going to be blending. Now this is my favorite one. What I like to do, and there's different ways to do this, is I like to make these little circles. Tiny little circles around it. And then using your pencil, get lighter. Don't push so hard on the paper. And lighter. It's barely touching the paper now. It's barely touching the paper. And I like to use my thumb and I blend it. That one's my favorite. Blending is my favorite. So we have stippling, hatching, cross-hatching, and blending. Let's review what we went over today. Today we learned about value and we learned about contrast. Then we took a look at the very famous Italian artist named Caravaggio. Then we made a value scale and we learned 4 different techniques for shading. In our next lesson, we're going to learn about how to use those values and contrast and our 4 different techniques in shading and create what's called a still life. We're also going to be looking at Caravaggio's still life. So until next time, stay safe and stay creative.